We'll move to question time. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. President, yesterday the Minister stated that the Albanese government wishes to see more Australian uranium mined and more Australian uranium exported to support zero-emissions energy generation throughout the world. Minister, how does the Albanese government plan to achieve the growth in Australian uranium exports? What strategies is the Albanese government pursuing to support Australia's uranium industry and its growth?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Birmingham for his question. Well, of course, we start the process with one of the finest resources ministers we've ever had. Well, you ought to. Senator Cash, you ought to at least appreciate that for the first time in our history, with a resources minister from your home state, of course, we've got one of the finest people, one of the finest minds, one of the. Well, why are you? Here we have a fantastic female resources minister from Western Australia, and all I'm saying is, in answer to your question, is what are we doing about what first time is it? First time from Western Australia. No, well, I don't know about the first time, but she's a very fine female resources minister, and so we start our process. We start our process with this woman, and then of course. We look around the country. You know, where is the best, the largest, most successful uranium expansion? Of course, it comes from your home state in South Australia, Senator Birmingham. Well, it does produce good wine, true, and of course we've got a lot of that wine back into China just recently. Senator Watt, but you're distracting me, Senator Watt. Good job. So much good news. Yeah, good job. Yeah. So, secondly, we start with the great resources minister. Of course, we start with a wonderful resource in the far north of South Australia.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, given Minister King is such an exceptional minister in your words, and such a champion of the uranium industry and its exports to the world, does Minister King support removal of the moratorium on uranium mining and exporting from her home state of Western Australia?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell. Senator, order. I'm waiting for order. Senator Wong is on her feet. Senator Wong.
I just make the point that I think that the senator is asking about a state government position.
Senator Birmingham, you're free to stand once the minister has concluded.
I understand that question to be about state government legislation. It's not a matter within the minister's portfolio.
Senator Birmingham, on a point of order, point of order.
President, on the point of order, I was very clear in asking about the Federal Resources Minister, her position and her actions as it relates to a ban in her home state, which impedes, as it relates to the primary question, the ability to export more uranium to the world.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I am inclined to agree with the point of order as put by Senator Birmingham. It did relate to exports, which is a federal matter, and it did relate to Minister King. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Birmingham for his first supplementary question. Well, what I know about Minister King, of course, is that she supports the policies of the Labor Party. She's Prime Minister. Well, she is a Prime Minister. Yeah. No, she supports the policies of the supports the policies of the Labor Party, and of course, like all of us in this job in the Labor Party, we're here because of the Labor Party, and we follow the policies and the decisions of the. Well, I completely reject that suggestion. Absolutely.
Senator Cash.
Minister
Cash.
Minister King has the greatest respect for farmers, particularly Western Australian farmers, and of course, I've been with.
Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. Second supplementary question. Minister, given the stated ambitions of the Albanese Labor government to export more Australian uranium to the world, does the government welcome the opportunity provided by the increased use of zero-emissions nuclear energy in so many potential export markets?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
What the ambition of this Albanese Labor government, of course, is to increase our exports. No, our exports, and push up the prices. Of course, what we have a situation, Senator Birmingham, right at the moment where, in terms of our terms of trade, they've never been as great as they are at the moment. And the volumes of trade. Now, of course, one of the products we are exporting is uranium. I've just met just a few minutes ago with the people from the port of Newcastle, a wonderful port that's in the process of a massive. Yes, here we are. Senator Cadell knows all about it. Knows all about the port of Newcastle. We're on the cusp of an amazing expansion under the Albanese Labor
the time
government.
For answering has expired. Senator Green.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer. Cost of living relief for all Australians is the core focus of the government's budget. The centrepiece of the budget, Labor's tax cuts, start in just 6 days' time, which means more Australians will get to keep more of what they earn. The Albanese Labor government has delivered tax cuts for all Australians, not just some. And better still, 90% of women will be better off under Labor's plan. Can the minister elaborate on how Labor's tax cuts will support women with the cost of living?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Green for the question. And yes, I can, Senator Green, because those on this side of the chamber know how important it is to drive women's economic independence and improve women's economic security, which is why, when the tax cuts come in just 6 days, not only a tax cut for every taxpayer, but a bigger tax cut for 95% of women on the tax cuts that were previously designed. So more tax cuts going to more women. And I note that the former Prime Minister said, when asked about Stage 3, the original Stage 3, he said you don't fill out pink forms and blue forms on your tax return. But on this side of the chamber, again, we know that how much you earn, how the tax system interacts with that, and therefore how tax cuts are designed, does matter to women. It matters enormously to women. So 90% of women who pay tax will be better off. That's 5.8 million Australian women. On average, women taxpayers will receive a cut of $1,650, which is about $700 more than they were going to receive under the former government's tax plan. So childcare workers, disability carers, aged care workers, nurses and teachers are amongst those occupations that will benefit the most. And these are the occupations, of course, President, as we know, that have high levels of women workers. So in those occupations, workforce is around 80% women on average. Vital industries that contribute to our economy, our community and our quality of life. And that's why, when we designed these tax cuts, women were not an afterthought. They were absolutely front of mind. That women work hard across our economy, and we want to ensure that they keep more of their hard-earned money, and from the 1st of July they will.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Minister. We know that the recent budget was focused on cost of living, and the government is doing everything it can to provide relief for Australian households while putting downward pressure on inflation. Labor's tax cuts are the centrepiece of this effort, but can the minister outline how other measures in the May budget address cost of living and benefit women?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Green, and I can, President. As well as the tax cuts, from the 1st of July we will see 2 extra weeks of the government-funded PPL scheme, so the Paid Parental Leave scheme, taking PPL entitlement to 22 weeks. There will be $300 off every household's energy bill, freezing the cost of PBS medicines, and of course a pay rise for 2.6 million workers who are working on the award wage. From 1st of July, this budget also delivers over $1 billion for women's safety, bringing investments in women's safety to over $3.4 billion. We've also provided funding to pay superannuation on PPL, $1.9 billion to lift rent assistance, over $3 billion to reduce student debt and fix indexation of help loans, important investments in women's health, and importantly, we don't see any of these investments, President, as welfare policy. I know those over there, Senator Hume, identified that the budget was welfare policy. It's not. Important investments in women's economic independence.
Answering has expired. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thanks very much, President, and thank you, Minister. After a decade of women being left behind by the former coalition government, it's clear that the Albanese Labor government has put women back at the centre of government decision-making. How does representation of women in the government influence policy making, and why is it so important?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I can hear those over there groaning as we talk about important investments in women, important investments in women's safety, tax cuts, over $3.4 billion for women's safety, expanding PPL, paying super on it, cheaper childcare, lifting rent assistance, expanding parenting payments single and ditching parents next, workplace relations reform, Medicare reform, pay increases for the lowest paid and aged care workers. Over 50% of this government is women, but 100% of this government are committed to working for women. Those opposite haven't advanced any ideas that would support women in Australia because they are still having a fight with themselves about whether advancing women's rights or equality for women in their own ranks is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. The Minister for Defence was asked in the other place yesterday to confirm that Australia's future nuclear-powered submarines were safe, and he answered, the short answer to the honourable member's question is that it will be safe to serve on a nuclear-powered submarine. End quote. I welcome this clarification, and I seek confirmation that you agree with the Defence Minister that nuclear submarines are safe for Australia's submariners as well as those who will build them and maintain them.
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
What I would say, and I respect the fact that Senator Fawcett did serve our country, and always respect that. But I don't respect the way in which your party is seeking to bring the AUKUS debate into a no, mate.
Order.
You're wrong.
On your party.
Order.
I don't respect the way your party is choosing to bring the AUKUS project, the AUKUS endeavour, into in a vain attempt to shore up your energy plan, which is risky, expensive, uncosted, and is as a consequence of the anti-renewables obsession of your leader. I am, and have been, since we were briefed in opposition, an advocate for AUKUS in my party, publicly and in the country. And I have made clear our support for the project and our belief in the safety of this technology in nuclear submarines operating as it has in the Virginia class and others for decades. But to try and bring AUKUS the biggest endeavour this country has ever engaged in, into a pathetic political policy, a pathetic political fight, in an attempt to try and shore up a policy that you're embarrassed by, is really the height of hypocrisy. It really is, and it is beneath frankly, the dignity of some on that side who understand the importance of AUKUS and the importance
thank you, Minister.
of
The time for
bipartisanship
answering has
to stand
expired.
up.
Senator Fawcett, for order. Senator Mackenzie, it applies to you. Order, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Fawcett was on his feet. Senator Fawcett, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. And as you will have been aware, that question was not about AUKUS, it was about nuclear safety. And, Minister, can I ask, is the nuclear reactor facility at Lucas Heights, which has been in operation in the suburbs of Sydney since 1958, safe?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Well, as you would know, I'm not sure how this is a supplementary, but we'll go with it. And if I can just refer to the primary also, I make this point. We've seen the co-author of the Defence Strategic Review today, Mr Dean, and others, including Mr Richardson, publicly raising concerns about the way in which AUKUS has been brought into your policy debate. Maybe have a think about the fact that some people who are supportive of and have been part of the defence. Well, you said this is a supplementary, so I'm going with the primary. That they are raising the same concerns I am. The Lucas Heights facility has operated with support from both parties of government, including the Labor Party, for many decades to provide appropriate medical isotopes and the like. So, of course,
thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Fawcett, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And so, Minister, thank you for that confirmation that nuclear technology is safe. And given Australia's track record of and commitment to nuclear safety, as demonstrated from Lucas Heights and also the future fleet of submarines, will you or the Prime Minister now direct Labor members of Parliament to cease undermining the confidence of Australian people in nuclear technology with their reckless social media messages, including the depiction of
Senator
Australian
Gallagher.
cartoon characters with 3 eyes?
Minister Wong. Yes, Minister Wong. Sorry, I called you.
It says something about the coalition that they're more worried about some social media memes than about ensuring national security is above politics. It says something about them, doesn't it? You know, you're so glass-jawed. You're so worried about some social media thing I haven't even looked at. But you're happy to bring national security issues into a partisan debate. Give us a break. In relation to Lucas Heights, I would remind those opposite. As I said, the facility in Lucas Heights is a medical and research facility. It isn't a nuclear power plant, completely different in operation and scale from a traditional power plant, producing just 20 megawatts of energy, about 2% of the size of a typical 1 gigawatt large-scale nuclear facility. So, you know, I know you're grasping at straws because you still can't tell taxpayers how much you're going to make them pay. Senator Cash, you know, when did you turn into a socialist? When did you turn into a socialist, making taxpayers pay for this plan to build 7 reactors? When did you turn?
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment and Water, Minister Wong. Last night, UNESCO's report on the Great Barrier Reef made clear that climate change is the greatest threat to the Great Barrier Reef and that the Australian government is still on probation over the Great Barrier Reef's World Heritage in danger status. In particular, UNESCO urges the Australian government to act on climate and increase our emissions reduction targets. Will your government now legislate a more ambitious emission reduction target in order to help secure the future of the Great Barrier Reef? Will you take this commitment to the next election?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Whish-Wilson for the question, and he's right to raise again the issue of the Great Barrier Reef. We know that the biggest threat to reefs worldwide is climate change, and obviously the Great Barrier Reef is one of it's an extraordinary reef, but there are many coral reefs around the world which are feeling the effects of climate change and are at risk of further damage as a consequence. The Australian Government and the Queensland Government have welcomed UNESCO's latest draft decision on the Great Barrier Reef. It's a huge win for Queensland, a huge win for the thousands of people who rely on the reef for work, and a huge win for all the plants and animals that call it home. And I want to acknowledge the work of Senator Green as our envoy for the reef and for the work she's done with communities and more broadly.
Senator Whish-Wilson.
Yes, on that point of order, President, on relevance, I asked specifically whether you would now legislate a more ambitious climate target, emissions reduction target, as requested by UNESCO.
You did, and there was a preamble around UNESCO and what UNESCO reported, and the Minister is being relevant. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. I would say to you that we understand, unlike those opposite, that climate change is a risk for this country, which is why we have legislated both to reach net zero and a 43% emissions reductions target for 2030. I know that the Senator and his party say that's not enough. I trust that they also tell their voters that those opposite don't support the action to reduce emissions, and as I can see from Senator Canavan's recent statements, still don't support net zero by 2050. So we're back, things just keep going back to where they were. But it's like Groundhog Day again. But what I would also say to you, Senator, is those targets have to be delivered, and that requires us to transform this economy from a high emissions economy
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority said today only the strongest and swiftest actions to decrease global greenhouse gas emissions will reduce the risks and limit the impacts of climate change on the reef and coral reefs around the world. Minister, how is opening new coal mines and a future gas strategy that, for example, facilitates the Barossa Gas Project, one of the dirtiest projects in Australia's history, compatible with the strongest and swiftest actions on climate change?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
Thank you. I'd make a few points about our action on the reef. Apart from the net zero target and the commitment to reach 82% renewable energy supply by 2030, we've invested over $1 billion in the reef. We've accelerated water quality improvements, including $200 million for projects such as revegetation, grazing management and engineering work. We've introduced legislation to establish an independent EPA. We've withdrawn federal funding for dams that would have had a detrimental impact on reef quality. The Minister has rejected a coal mine that could have had direct impacts on the reef. We've engaged more Indigenous rangers to manage sea country, including the Crown of Thorns outbreaks, and we've commenced to phase out of gill nets in the marine park with a $185 million package. We are doing a great deal because we understand the importance of the reef to jobs, to the economy, but also for future generations.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, you just said that the report by UNESCO last night was a huge win for Queensland, a huge win for thousands of people who rely on the reef for work, and a huge win for all the plants and animals that call it home. Minister, the reef is fighting for its life after the 7th mass coral bleaching event this summer, the worst on record, and the science tells us that as the planet warms, this will get worse. How exactly is this a huge win for the Great Barrier Reef?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
The Senator might not think that it's important for us Queenslanders that this listing be maintained. He might want to speak against that. We understand the importance to Queenslanders and to Australia of the reef, both economically but also as part of our natural heritage. It's part of our natural heritage. I'll take the interjection about more action, as I have repeatedly said in this place. I know that some in the Greens political party think that yelling loudly about an issue actually is policy. It is not. Yelling loudly about an issue does not transform an economy. Yelling loudly about an issue does not deliver an 82% renewable energy component of our national electricity
Minister Wong,
system.
please resume your seat. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Point of order, President. Well, 2 points of order. Firstly, Senator Wong's misleading the chamber. There was no yelling loudly. And secondly, can she actually explain how the death of the Great Barrier Reef, one of the great tragedies of our lifetime, is somehow a huge win for people who live on the reef?
Senator Whish-Wilson, both of those are debating points. Minister Wong, please continue.
That's true. You weren't yelling before just then, so that's okay. my point is that we actually, as a government that are committed to acting on climate change, are taking on the hard task of changing our economy.
Has expired.
That's what's required.
Senator Pratt.
Question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong. Given how important affordable energy is to Australian households and business today, can the Minister please outline the progress being achieved under the government's Reliable Renewables Plan? And can the Minister please provide details on the Albanese Labor government's plan to help Australians with their power bills right now?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank the Senator for her question, Senator Pratt for her question, and I say to her that the only plan supported by experts to deliver the clean, cheap, reliable and resilient energy system Australia needs is the Albanese government's Reliable Renewables Plan. And under Labor, we've had an increase in renewables in the national grid of around 25%. We've had record investment in batteries and storage. We've had over 330,000 rooftop solar installations last year alone, and we've greenlit more than 50 renewable projects, enough to power 3 million homes. And of course, from the 1st of July, the Albanese Labor government is taking $300 off the power bills for every household. $300 off the power bills for every household. And of course, as senators know, this stands in stark contrast to Mr Dutton and his nuclear reactors. The reactors he won't tell us what it will cost taxpayers. He won't say how much it will push up bills. Perhaps it's because his nuclear reactors are the most expensive option and they are decades away. Analysis by the Smart Energy Council estimates building the coalition's 7 nuclear reactors could cost as much as $600 billion. $600 billion of taxpayer money. Who would have thought Peter Dutton was such a tax and spend socialist? Who would have thought Peter Dutton was such a tax and spend socialist? $600 billion of taxpayers' money. I mean, this nuclear fantasy has to be one of the riskiest, most ill-thought-out policies ever put forward by a party of government. One of the worst we have ever seen. Now, we all know we've got work to do. After Australia suffered a decade of denial and delay and incompetent inaction under the Liberals and Nationals, 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announced their closure under you, and you did nothing.
Has expired. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
No, the government's energy price relief will make a big difference to people right across the country. So can the minister please now detail the importance of providing certainty in the energy transition and the impact on Australians' energy bills of risky, unrealistic, uncosted alternatives?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Well, the Albanese government's energy plan is the best way to deliver cheaper, cleaner and more reliable energy. What we know about Mr Dutton's plan is it's too slow to keep the lights on, too expensive to build and too risky for Australia's energy needs. You know, since we came to office, renewable generation has increased by 25% in the national electricity market. That's a result of certainty. Certainty for investors and industry. Even Senator Birmingham last week said there is absolutely a place for large-scale renewables. It's an important part of the mix. Of course, just before, the day before, Mr Littleproud had said the opposite. As I said, 24 under
Order.
28 coal-fired power stations announced their closure under you, and you did nothing, and you still haven't learnt. You're putting forward a policy too slow to keep the lights on, too expensive to build and too risky for Australia's energy needs.
Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
President, incoming chair of the Climate Change Authority and former New South Wales Liberal Treasurer and Energy Minister Matt Kean yesterday said about
Just a
nuclear...
moment, Senator Pratt, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. I could not hear Senator Pratt's question. Order. Order. Senator Pratt, would you please begin again?
Begin again.
Order. Order.
Thank you. I can begin again if the clock's reset. But
yes, sure.
incoming chair of the Climate Change Authority and former New South Wales Liberal Treasurer and Energy Minister Matt Kean yesterday said about nuclear energy...
Senator Pratt. Order across the chamber. Senator Mackenzie. Order. I would like to be able to... Senator Mackenzie, I would like to be able to hear Senator Pratt ask her question. Senator Pratt, please continue.
It would take far too long and be far too expensive. Can the minister please explain to the Senate why renewables are the best way to achieve a more reliable, affordable and cleaner energy future for Australia?
Good. Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Wong.
Well, I know how much those opposite like to be reminded about what Mr Kean has said, so I would just say that Mr Kean is right. Reliable renewables are the best and cheapest way to secure Australia's energy future. Best way to secure Australia's energy future. Meanwhile, what we have is Mr Dutton, who refuses to tell Australians how much it will cost to build nuclear reactors. He refuses to tell Australians how much more your bills will be as a consequence of his policy. And he also won't tell Australians how he's actually going to power the country in the decades it's going to take for these taxpayer-funded reactors to be built. Now, you know, the only thing he will say, I love this, this is what he says, but it will be a big bill. It will be a big bill. It will be a big bill, no question about that. It'll be a big bill. That's the alternative Prime Minister of Australia's transparency with Australian people. It'll be a big bill.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Attorney-General, Minister Watt. Minister, Meta has announced that from tomorrow it plans to harvest social media users' data to train its new AI tools, sparking serious concerns right around the world about privacy issues and copyright, particularly amongst creatives. Consumers in the EU and UK are able to opt out if they choose to because of protections their government has put in place. What action is the government taking to protect the data of Australians and Australian small businesses?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Pocock. I share your concerns, Senator Pocock, as does this government, and I'm certainly aware that from the 26th of June, as in tomorrow, Meta plans on using public social media activity from users to train and improve its AI tools. I think that this raises privacy concerns for many Australians. It corresponds with the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner's 2023 Privacy Survey, which found that roughly 70% of Australians consider that organisations using AI must comply with strict privacy rules, and less than 20% are comfortable with businesses using AI to make decisions about them based on their personal information. Senator Pocock, you ask about what action the government is taking. As a starting point, the Privacy Commissioner, Ms Carly Kind, has requested a meeting with Meta to discuss their proposed privacy safeguards regarding its AI tools. The Albanese government is also committed to stronger privacy protections for Australians. And as you'd be aware, Senator Pocock, we do have a number of proposed privacy reforms that we seek to bring through this parliament, and they would assist in mitigating some of these risks and concerns by requiring the collection, use and disclosure of personal information to be fair and reasonable in the circumstances, They would require consent to be voluntary and informed and recognise the ability for individuals to withdraw consent. They would require entities to provide clear information about the use of algorithms and profiling to recommend content to individuals, and they would provide individuals with additional rights, including a right to insure under certain circumstances. It's a bit trite, I guess, to say that with the use of AI growing in Australia and internationally, we are finding that the laws that we have in place right around the world need updating to ensure that safeguards are provided. And I'm looking forward to the outcome of that meeting between the Privacy Commissioner and Meta while we get on with our broader reforms.
Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Thank you, Minister. It's good to hear that you've requested a meeting with Meta. I was listening to an interview, and an Associate Professor of Law and Tech at UWA, Dr. Julia Powles, highlighted that the speculative collection of information for future unknown purposes is unlawful in Australia. Will the AG actually stand up for Australians and prevent this foreign company from breaching our laws and taking Australians' data without their consent?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Pocock. I certainly can assure the Australian public that the Attorney-General will use all powers at his disposal to ensure that Australians' privacy is protected, whether it be from social media giants or others who do not observe the privacy rights of Australians. So to the extent that existing laws do permit action to be taken, I'm confident the Attorney-General will give that serious consideration while these discussions go on directly with Meta about the precise issue that you're asking about and that, according to Meta, it intends to pursue from tomorrow. So there can be no doubt about the Albanese government's commitment to ensuring and upholding Australians' privacy rights. As I say, we do have a range of privacy reforms proposed that we intend to pursue to strengthen those rights. But to the extent, as I say, that laws provide opportunities for the Attorney-General to take action, I'm confident that he'll do so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Minister, what date was a meeting requested with Meta, and is the government's plan of action to take action after the fact, or is there some sort of preemptive move from the Attorney-General to tell Meta that they can't do what they plan on doing from tomorrow? This is not something that can wait.
Senator Lambie, it's not your question. Minister Watt.
I would obviously have to take on notice, Senator Pocock, the date that meeting was sought by the Privacy Commissioner, and I'm happy in doing so to provide any further information I can as to other steps that the Attorney-General and his department have taken in relation to this matter. But as I say, I think the fact that meeting is occurring between the Privacy Commissioner does demonstrate the seriousness with which we take these issues, along with those extensive privacy reforms that we intend to bring into Parliament as soon as we can.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Attorney-General. Chronic underfunding of community legal centres is forcing centres to turn away more than 1,000 Australians every day. Not only did the budget fail to provide desperately needed funds to address workforce shortages and increasing demand, it does not provide commitment to funding beyond June 2025 in the forward estimates. Tasmania has the lowest ratio of legal practitioners to population of any jurisdiction in this country, with a lack of lawyers placing more pressure on the legal assistance sector. At the same time, Commonwealth funding for community legal centres has not kept pace with the population growth in Tasmania. Why is the government neglecting to appropriately fund community legal centres in Tasmania and across the rest of the nation?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Lambie. I can assure you, Senator Lambie, that I very much understand the important role that community legal services play. In my much younger days, I actually did do quite a bit of volunteer work in community legal services, both in Melbourne and I think I did some in Brisbane as well, to my recollection. They play a vital role in providing legal advice and legal services to some of the most disadvantaged members of our community. And that's exactly why, in this year's budget, the government did announce $44.1 million of urgent funding for this coming financial year to help legal assistance providers address current resource and workforce issues until the new National Legal Assistance Partnership Agreement commences on the 1st of July 2025. Obviously, forming that new agreement, which commences in just over 12 months' time, is the key point in time that we can lock in longer-term funding for community legal services, but we recognise that it was important to make sure that they have the funding they need to get them through to that point in time so that they can meet the very real resource and workforce issues that many of them have. That new National Legal Assistance Partnership between the Commonwealth and all states and territories is intended to be a 5-year agreement to fund vital legal assistance services for the most vulnerable Australians. So, as I say, it's through that longer-term agreement that would commence in a bit over 12 months' time that we would be seeking to lock in that longer-term funding and provide certainty for community legal services. That does require negotiations with the states and territories, and inevitably that does take a period of time, but we didn't want to leave those community legal services stranded without the extra resources that they need in the meantime. That's why we provided that urgent funding through this year's budget, and I certainly hope that that goes some way to meeting the needs of those services.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Lambie's second supplementary.
Thank you. Yes, you did provide that funding, but the additional funding was $125 million. You were way off and way short to address funding issues for community legal centres, which will be used to keep the doors open and employ around 2,000 full-time staff to simply meet the demand. With just $9.3 million extra funding provided in the budget, does the government have a plan to address this funding shortfall, and when will the government commit the necessary funding to community legal centres to ensure access to justice is maintained into the future?
Thank you, Senator Lambie, and I incorrectly said that was the second sup. It was the first sup. Minister.
Thanks. Sorry, you've called me, President?
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry. Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Lambie. As I say, Senator Lambie, we very much understand the financial difficulties that many community legal services are under and have been under for a long period of time. I'm sure within my notes here somewhere I could talk about the underfunding that those services received from the former coalition government, but we're more interested in actually trying to sort out the problem and provide them with the funding that they need. As I say, through the new national 5-year agreement that's expected to come into force in a bit over 12 months' time, that would be the vehicle to provide that longer-term funding for those services. I'm sure you're aware, Senator Lambie, that only very recently, and that is since the most recent budget, we have now received the report of Dr Warren Mundy to review the current legal assistance partnership agreement between the Commonwealth and the states. That has provided good advice to us that we can take into account in working out the proper funding level going forward.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you. The community legal sector is a female-dominated workforce, with salaries being paid significantly less than both private practice or equivalent positions within government by as much as 35%. If the government is serious about addressing the gender pay gap, what is the government doing to address the gender pay gap experienced by those employed in the community legal centres across the country, especially those women?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Lambie. You're right, Senator Lambie. In my experience, many, and a majority, in fact, of the staff who work at community legal services are women. And just like in every other part of the workforce, unfortunately, too many of them do continue to experience the gender pay gap. More broadly, one of the things that this government is most proud of is the fact that we have reduced the gender pay gap to the lowest it's ever been on record across the entire economy. But we recognise that a gap still exists, including in legal services, and that's something that we want to tackle. It would certainly be our intention that through the extra funding that was provided in this year's budget and that will inevitably be provided in the next 5-year agreement, that would go some way to meeting those issues. Of course, it wasn't that long ago that under a Labor government we did see a significant pay rise for workers in the community sector, including in these legal services, the majority of whom are women. So Labor has a pretty good track record in trying to meet those needs in those services, and we'll continue to do what we can.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Farrell. Oh, sorry. Senator Sterle, beg your pardon, my bad.
It's me, Don, if you want, but anyway, I'll go. Here we go. My question is to the Minister representing the...
Senator Sterle, just... Yeah. Beg your pardon. Sorry, Senator Sterle. Senator Urquhart.
Thank you. I don't get many questions, so I'm happy that Sturley will give me one. My question is to the Foreign Minister, Senator Wong. Over the last 2 years, the Albanese Labor government has worked to help bring Julian Assange home. Just last month, the Prime Minister said enough is enough. There's nothing to be served by the ongoing incarceration of Mr Assange, and we continue to work very closely to achieve that outcome. Can the Foreign Minister please advise the Senate on what the government is doing to support Mr Assange?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Urquhart for the question. I thank Senators Farrell and Still for allowing me to respond on this, given that the Prime Minister has just responded to the House to a question on Mr Assange. The Prime Minister and I have been very clear. Mr Assange's case has dragged on for too long. Over the last 2 years, the Albanese government has advocated for him to come home. That advocacy has been led by the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister has been very clear about the priority he gives to Mr Assange's case. He has been supported in that by the Attorney-General, by me, by the relentless work of senior diplomats and others, and we want to be in a position to see Mr Assange reunited with his family in Australia. Mr Assange has legal proceedings scheduled in the United States. Obviously, it isn't appropriate for me or anyone to comment on ongoing court proceedings. What I can do is acknowledge that there are many here in Parliament who have advocated for Mr Assange to come home, as have supporters in Australia and around the world. Since we came to office, the Albanese Labor government has been working to bring Mr Assange's case to a close. The Prime Minister has led these efforts and has personally raised Mr Assange's case at the most senior levels, including with President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak. Similarly, the Attorney-General and me, as Foreign Minister, have raised Mr Assange's case, as I've said in this place, with the United States, United States, American and United Kingdom counterparts. Australian officials, in particular Ambassador Kevin Rudd and High Commissioner Stephen Smith, have worked closely with US and UK officials in support of these efforts, and we have worked constructively with the US and the UK for the efforts to find a pathway for all parties.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Urquhart, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Over the last few years, how has the Albanese government supported Mr Assange and his family?
Minister Wong.
Over the last 2 years, the Albanese government has worked to support Mr Assange and his family. This included advocating for due process, for humane treatment, for medical care and for legal representation, just as we do for all Australians who are detained overseas. As Foreign Minister, I have met with members of Mr Assange's family and legal team on a number of occasions, as has Australia's High Commissioner of the United Kingdom and our Ambassador to the United States, as well as our hard-working consular team in Canberra. For several years, Mr Assange declined Australian government consular visits, but last year, at my request, our High Commissioner to the United Kingdom met with Mr Assange and has done so on a number of occasions since. We will continue to provide consular assistance to Mr Assange.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Urquhart, second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Wong. I am aware that there are many in this place who have supported Mr Assange. Can you please update the Senate on cross-party efforts to help bring him home?
Thank you, Senator Urquhart. Minister Wong.
Thank the Senator for that question. I know that there are many around the world and in Australia who have passionately advocated for Mr Assange, and I recognise those parliamentarians who have been part of that advocacy. Last September, the Bring Julian Assange Home parliamentary group co-conveners travelled to Washington, and they advocated for the incarceration of Mr Assange to end. That is consistent with the approach, the position that has been articulated by the Albanese government and that we have been very clear on. We have consistently stated that there is nothing to be served by the ongoing incarceration of Mr Julian Assange.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on the 31st of July 2023, you told the Chamber that electricity prices in the ACT had fallen due to its 100% renewable energy generation. If you still believe this to be true, can you explain why the ACT energy provider, ACTE, AGL has increased their prices by 12.75% just this month?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator McDonald for the question. In relation to Actu AGL, which is the provider here in the Territory, that's really a matter for them. I don't have responsibility for the price setting. There's an ICRC in the ACT that does that on behalf, and then the utilities apply that to their account holders. So I can't answer on that. But what I can say is that the ACT has led the way in terms of renewable energy generation. I was proud to be part of a government that took that decision many years ago and started the shift from a reliance on gas particularly into more adoption of renewable energy across households in the ACT, and households in the ACT have been the beneficiary of that. In terms of some of the price increases that we have seen around the country, but also importantly in supporting the investment into renewables. And I know we were one of the first jurisdictions to have reverse auctions for renewable energy projects. We were one of the first jurisdictions to have big solar farms built that were providing energy into the grid here. I think the ACT has often led the way on these things. But I'm proud to be part of a government that continues to support the rollout of renewable energy. I'm proud to stand here and say it is the cheapest form of energy. It will help households with these costs, and that we don't support the scam that's trying to be pulled over the wool on people's eyes of this nuclear energy fantasy that seems to be peddled by some over there. Not all, because I've hardly seen you awake this question time in terms of leaning into support such a so-called big announcement.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, first supplementary. Order. 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 I have Senator McDonald on her feet. Senator McDonald.
Thank you. Minister, almost 5% of this increase was due to network and transmission costs. Have transmission costs increases of 5% been included in the costings of your renewables-only energy policy?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. Rewiring the nation and the cost of that has been outlined in the budget paper since we came to government. And through Rewiring the Nation is how we're investing in the projects that are acquired, but also in the transmission and how we hook other projects up into the grid. So in terms of being upfront about what some of those costs are, yes, we have been. I can talk to other projects where those costs are outlined in the budget papers. But there is no doubt, whichever way you try to slice and dice it or confuse it or pretend it's otherwise, renewables are the cheapest form of energy. The world is shifting to renewables. And here we have a so-called plan, a policy of a few pages that doesn't say how much it costs, doesn't say how they will do it, doesn't say when they will do it. I mean, what a joke. 22 policies and you couldn't land one in government and one in opposition and you can't land that.
The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Minister, how much more are Australians paying for energy since the Prime Minister promised to reduce power bills by $275 on the 3rd of December 2021?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Well, thankfully it hasn't been left to those opposite to decide this, because of course they opposed the energy bill relief that we provided in the last budget. When we took a vote in this chamber about energy bill relief, taking pressure off some concession households and small businesses, what happened over there? They opposed it. So thankfully this government, whilst we are taking responsibility for the shift and the transition to renewable energy system and being a renewable energy superpower that we can be, and seizing all the opportunities that come with that, we are at the same time investing in that, making sure that people have some help with their cost of living on their energy bills in particular. So we can support households with the shift, seize the jobs that come, attract the investment we need, deliver the projects that are needed and be upfront and take responsibility for it, unlike those opposite.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, Minister Watt. Cost of living is top of mind for regional Australians, with energy affordability one of their key concerns. Indeed. The Australian Energy Market Operator has said that renewables are the lowest cost way to supply electricity to homes and businesses throughout Australia's transition to a net zero economy. How will the Albanese Labor government's clean, cheap and reliable energy plan benefit regional Australians?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. It was a very good question, arguably the best all day, I think, Senator Stewart. On the 1st of July, only 6 days' time from now, we're taking $300 off the power bills of every regional household around Australia. Some of them are starting to smile for the first time today. We know you like that. In 2 decades, in contrast, Mr Dutton will serve up to regional Australians the most expensive form of energy there is, with zero relief in the meantime. Our Reliable Renewables plan is the only plan supported by experts to deliver the clean, cheap, reliable and resilient energy system that regional Australians deserve. And it's the only energy plan that is delivering jobs for regional Australians right now. Under Labor, we've had a 25% increase in renewables in the national grid. We've had record investment in batteries and storage. We've had more than 50 renewable projects greenlit, enough to power 3 million homes, and we've had over 330,000 rooftop solar installations last year alone, and many of these have been in regional Australia. And that's because renewables are the cheapest form of energy, and getting more renewables into our system is the key to bringing regional power prices down. And that is something that regional Australians already understand. Only a few weeks ago, I was in Armidale, in the electorate of anti-renewables zealot Mr Barnaby Joyce, and there I met with the local mayor, Mr Sam Copland, who said that local farmers were increasingly putting wind turbines on their property to shore up their business during times of drought. Mayor Copland has also said the construction phase for renewables will likely last many years and provide a significant boost to the local economy. Former NFF President Mr Brent Findlay is another who's set to host more than a dozen turbines on his property in southwest Queensland, and he says this is a region that has been heavily impacted by drought.
Thank you,
There's
Minister.
very little chance to diversify. This is a chance to diversify and spread.
Senator Watt, I will ask you to withdraw the last part of your comment about Mr Barnaby Joyce.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. That sounds like a very sensible plan, Minister. At the May budget, the government outlined its plan for a future made in Australia, creating jobs and economic opportunities across the country. Why is the Albanese government's rollout of renewable energy so important to securing jobs in the regions?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Another cracker of a question. We know that the world's climate emergency is regional Australia's jobs opportunity. Jobs and Skills Australia has found Australia will need 32,000 more electricians between now and 2030 and 85,000 more to 2050. In the 38 critical clean energy occupations, we need 240,000 jobs by 2030, and the renewable energy rollout is already creating jobs in regional Australia. For example, in my home state of Queensland, in the town of Gladstone, it's cementing its spot as a world leader when it comes to creating new, clean economy manufacturing jobs in hydrogen and renewable energy. But renewables are also vital to keeping existing jobs in towns like Gladstone. Earlier this year, global resources giant Rio Tinto signed Australia's largest renewable power purchase agreement to supply its Gladstone operations in Queensland. Their CEO said, "We now have a pathway to provide the competitive, firmed power our Gladstone plants need. Renewables are the key to keeping our region strong."
The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. After a decade of failed energy policies under those opposite, Liberals and Nationals, regional Australians want reliable and resilient energy sources today. Why is investment in renewable energy sources the right path for powering regional Australia? And what are the main risks to securing clean, cheap and reliable energy for the regions?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Stewart. Renewables are cheap, clean and provide a valuable source of income for regional Australians. But of course, the biggest risk to this income source is the Coalition's risky nuclear gamble, led by the new advocate of Soviet-style policies, Mr Dutton. That's right. Proletariat Pete is not content with chasing away the thousands of jobs being created in our regions through cheap renewable energy.
Minister Watt. Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie. Order. Please withdraw the comment. Thank you.
He's not content with chasing away the thousands of jobs being created in our regions through cheap renewable energy. He and his team, led here by Bolshevik Burmo and Comrade Cash, won't tell regional... I withdraw. They won't tell regional Australians how much they will pay to build their nuclear reactors, how much nuclear power will add to their bills, how much nuclear waste there will be or where it will go, and just how many reactors there will be in regional Australian communities. Nuclear is the most expensive form of energy. All that means is higher taxes and higher bills for our regions.
The time for answering has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.